Welcome to Front Row, and today we have Mr. Dinesh Fernandopulle, CEO of Synapsys, DFCC Bank's Fintech subsidiary. Welcome, Mr. Fernandopulle. Dinesh, let's talk about the general climate for Fintech in Sri Lanka. How would you assess it as of now?
Thank you, and good to be here. So in terms of the climate for Fintech in Sri Lanka, I would say we are kind of middle of the road. We may have had a bit of a late start in getting the various building blocks together to create that environment. From necessary regulatory agreements to other policies when it comes to say taxation or things like exchange control and all that, which are necessary in today's fintech world, because it's not only that we are generating some product or service to be used by our own domestic market. Sometimes we have to bring in certain talent or products and embed them in the service offering. So then you kind of need a free movement of ideas, people, products, and intellectual property.
Right. So from a regulatory point of view, how burdensome or facilitatory is the regulations on fintech right now in Sri Lanka?
Right. I think we're making good progress. Recently, you would have seen some talk of the central bank's sandbox initiative. This is something that I actually mentioned in a conference in December, and at that time the central bank wasn't, at least I was not aware that they were considering that. So that kind of initiative is really good. So some of the advanced economies have already implemented those things, and then even some of the not so advanced. There's about 40 odd countries following the big guys like Singapore and Hong Kong and London who have already done this, and countries like Brunei, who I hope nobody gets offended, but you don't think of it as the front runner in fintech, right?
Right. So in terms of maybe South Asian economies, where would you place Sri Lanka right?
Obviously we're behind the Singapores and the Hong Kongs. We're kind of middle of the pack. I think now there's beyond the sandbox, which allows fintechs to go and experiment in a safe environment without upsetting the integrity of the financial system, or with consumer protections in place. You get to experiment and prototype. But you also need the banks to open up to these fintechs and not just keep them captive. So in that sense, now NTB has this open API, but one bank alone having an open API is not enough. Now in other countries beyond the sandbox, they have gone into the open information or open banking, where the regulator mandates that under safe conditions and with customer approval, that banks have to release this information. So if I want to get access to a loan, multiple banks have to release the necessary information so I can make a good choice in a loan that's best for me, without having to go bank by bank in succession.
So let's talk about Synapsys, it's quite pioneering in the fintech arena as well, in terms of especially going into the rural areas, in terms of agent-free banking in rural areas and so on. What are some of the challenges that you face from the consumer side? So we know a lot about the regulatory barriers that you face, but from the consumer side of things, what sort of obstacles do you face?
Right. So I think it's awareness. So we think, we've been doing the agent banking for over 6 years, I think, and actually we started in like the Dambulla area and Polonnaru and those kinds of areas, and then spread. I think it's awareness. Just as probably even more than you spend on the technology, you have to spend on awareness, education, not only the consumer, but even say the bank staff who are in those front lines, because if they're surprised by some fintech that comes out there, it's not good, right? So that's one thing. Then also customers still are a bit nervous to put their money in these new services, and sometimes our established entities don't do a good job in assuaging that fear. Instead, they kind of promote the fear. So, somebody needs to make that investment. Maybe it should be the fintech, but where people are made to understand that it's easier to physically rob a bank than steal from some kind of encrypted platform.
So I think finally, in terms of the way forward, what do you see as potential opportunities for Sri Lanka in fintech, and particularly from private sector perspective, where can the private sector better plug into the fintech market?
Okay. So one is, I think, for free kind of independent fintechs, it's a little bit hard to raise money. So I mean, Synapsys kind of benefits because we are covered by the DFCC umbrella. So that the opportunity given to my team, I think other corporates need to give. So that idea of entrepreneurs, within a corporate trying out new things. So in that situation, I think you need more investment. You need probably some freedom from just the corporate goals. And I mean, the opportunities, we probably have to look at things that are still on the horizon, because if we try and do the same thing, payments, for instance, it's a very crowded market in terms of number of players offering things, and it's also our population is not that big, and people like Alipay and all that are also going to come in here pretty soon. So it's other areas, perhaps investment advice, perhaps supply chain financing, things like that we can make a head start, and something that's needed in our country and the surrounding regions, pioneering emerging markets, rather than what's needed in New York and London.
Okay, thank you very much, Dinesh. And I think it's very clear that there is opportunity, but there is also scope for a lot of improvement in terms of the regulatory side, but also in terms of innovation from the private sector perspective as well. Yeah. So thank you very much again. And for similar content, please join us on Economy.lk and Front Row in the future. Thank you.